As our quiet journey through the past continues, we now turn our attention to the very genesis of the Victorian age, the formative years of Alexandrina Victoria, a princess born into a world of royal duty and dynastic expectation. Imagine the stillness of Kensington Palace in the early hours of May 24, 1819. Within its venerable walls, a new life began, one that would irrevocably alter the course of British history. Her birth, to Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathearn, the fourth son of King George III, and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, was not initially seen as a direct path to the throne. Indeed, there were many older male heirs, brothers of her father, who stood between her and the crown. Yet, fate, in its often unforeseen wisdom, had other plans. The early 19th century in Britain was a period of considerable uncertainty regarding the royal succession. King George III, a monarch who had ruled for 60 years, was in the twilight of his life, afflicted by recurring bouts of illness. His numerous sons, while reaching adulthood, had produced few legitimate heirs. The Prince Regent, later King George IV, had only one legitimate child, Princess Charlotte, who tragically died in childbirth in 1817. This sudden void spurred a frantic rush among George III's younger sons to marry and secure the succession. Among them was Edward, Duke of Kent. He swiftly married Victoria, a widowed German princess whose brother, Leopold, would later become the first king of the Belgians. This union, though born of dynastic necessity, soon yielded the precious child who would become queen. Tragically, Victoria's early years were marked by loss. Her father, the Duke of Kent, died suddenly in January 1820, just 8 months after her birth. Mere days later, her grandfather, King George III, also passed away. These events left the infant Victoria effectively fatherless and under the guardianship of her ambitious mother, the Duchess of Kent, and the Duchess's comptroller, Sir John Conroy. This formidable duo would implement what came to be known as the Kensington system, a highly structured and remarkably isolated upbringing designed to mold Victoria into a queen under their direct influence. Imagine the young princess, growing up within the confines of Kensington Palace, her days meticulously planned and supervised. She was rarely permitted to play with other children, her friendships closely monitored, and her interactions with the outside world severely limited. This protective, almost suffocating environment was intended to shelter her from the perceived moral laxity of the Hanoverian court, but it also fostered a strong sense of self-reliance and an intense desire for freedom within the young Victoria. She was educated by a governess, Baroness Leysen, a German Lutheran whose devotion to Victoria was unwavering. Leysen provided the young princess with a broad education, encompassing languages such as German, French, and Latin, as well as history, geography, mathematics, music, and drawing, a talent which Victoria would nurture throughout her life. The Kensington system, while restrictive, inadvertently cultivated a resilient and determined character in Victoria, fostering an independent spirit that would later serve her well on the throne. As the years drifted by, the likelihood of Victoria's ascension steadily increased. Her uncles, King George IV and later King William IV, ruled in succession but produced no further legitimate heirs. Each passing year brought the crown closer to the young princess. William IV, though fond of Victoria, held a strong dislike for her mother and Conroy, and openly expressed his desire to live long enough to prevent a regency, believing Victoria would be a more capable monarch once she reached the age of majority. This tense dynamic within the royal family simmered beneath the surface of public life, a quiet undercurrent to the bustling activity of a rapidly industrializing nation. Finally, the moment arrived. It was the early morning of June 20th, 1837. King William IV had passed away in the pre-dawn hours at Windsor Castle. At Kensington Palace, the 18-year-old Princess Victoria was still asleep. The Archbishop of Canterbury, William Howley, and the Lord Chamberlain, the Marquess Conyngham, arrived to deliver the momentous news. Imagine the solemnity of that moment. Two grave figures, dressed in the formal attire of their office, arriving at such an early hour. Victoria was awakened, her hair still unbound, wearing her dressing gown. When informed that the king was dead and she was now queen, she asked if she could be left alone for a moment. This brief pause, a space of quiet contemplation before the enormity of her new role, speaks volumes about her composure and a dawning awareness of the immense responsibility now placed upon her slender shoulders. Within hours, Victoria held her first Privy Council. This august body, composed of the most powerful men in the kingdom, ministers, peers, and high-ranking officials, gathered to formally acknowledge their new sovereign. They watched with keen interest as the young queen, petite in stature, entered the council chamber. Her presence immediately commanded respect. She read her declaration with a clear, steady voice, pledging to dedicate herself to the welfare of her people. Lord Melbourne, the Whig Prime Minister, was particularly impressed by her composure and her sharp intelligence. He noted her dignified and graceful manner, a marked contrast to the sometimes erratic behavior of her immediate predecessors. This initial public performance set a crucial tone for her reign, reassuring a nation that had perhaps grown weary of the eccentricities of earlier Hanoverian monarchs. With the crown came a newfound liberation for Victoria. The suffocating Kensington system was immediately cast aside. One of her very first acts as queen was to ban Sir John Conroy from her presence, a clear signal that she would no longer be manipulated or controlled. Her childhood governess, Baroness Lehzen, remained a trusted companion and private secretary, providing a comforting continuity from her past into her grand new present. Victoria embraced her newfound independence with relish, reveling in the freedom to choose her own daily schedule, her own companions, and to make her own decisions, however small. The restrictive routine of her youth was replaced by the demanding but exhilarating rhythm of royal life. However, the early years of her reign were not without their challenges. The young queen, still learning the intricate dance of British politics, made a significant misstep in 1839 that came to be known as the bedchamber crisis. Following a general election, the Whig government led by Lord Melbourne faced a defeat, and he offered his resignation. Sir Robert Peel, the leader of the Conservative Party, was invited to form a new government. Peel, however, insisted that Victoria dismiss some of her Whig ladies of the bedchamber, whose husbands held prominent positions in the outgoing Whig government. He argued that the Queen's household, particularly those in close proximity to her, should not be overtly political, fearing that their presence would undermine his conservative administration. Victoria, advised by Lord Melbourne and fiercely loyal to her ladies, many of whom were personal friends, refused. She saw Peel's request as an affront, a demand for her to dismiss her trusted companions, and an attempt to assert undue political control over her personal household. Her refusal led to Peel's inability to form a government, and consequently, Melbourne returned as Prime Minister. While Victoria saw this as a victory for her prerogative, it was a significant political blunder that highlighted her inexperience and her strong-willed nature. It demonstrated a monarch still learning the delicate balance between personal preference and constitutional responsibility. It also sparked considerable public debate, drawing attention to the power dynamics between the crown and the evolving parliamentary system. Amidst these early political trials and the bustling demands of her new role, there was a growing awareness of the need for a royal consort. The stability of the monarchy, and indeed the future of the succession, depended upon it. Victoria herself recognized this necessity, even if initially the prospect of marriage seemed a distant and perhaps unwelcome intrusion on her newfound freedom. However, the search for a suitable husband had been ongoing even before her accession, with various European princes considered. Among them was her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Albert, handsome, intelligent, and serious-minded, had visited Kensington Palace years earlier, and Victoria had found him agreeable. But at that time, other suitors were also being considered. Now, as queen, the decision rested entirely with her. The British public, keenly observing their young sovereign, looked for a consort who could provide stability and support without overshadowing the queen herself. The role of the prince consort would be a delicate one, requiring immense tact and dedication. As we prepare to turn the page to the next chapter of Victoria's life, we reflect on this formative period, a sheltered childhood, an unexpected rise to power, and the first taste of both the glories and the challenges of the crown. The stage is now set for a union that would not only define Victoria's personal happiness, but would also profoundly influence the direction of the British monarchy and its vast empire. The path ahead beckons, leading us towards the heart of her enduring reign. As the tranquil narrative of Victoria's early reign settles gently around us, we now move to perhaps the most pivotal moment of her personal life, and consequently, a profound turning point for the British monarchy itself: her marriage to Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Imagine the young queen, having asserted her independence, navigating the early political currents of her reign, now contemplating a union that would define her happiness and shape her legacy. The stage was set not merely for a royal wedding, but for a partnership that would transform the very essence of the crown. Prince Albert, born just 3 months after Victoria in 1819, was her first cousin, a son of her mother's brother, Duke Ernst I of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. From an early age, Albert was a serious and intellectually gifted young man. His education was rigorous, encompassing science, art, music, and philosophy, reflecting the Enlightenment ideals of his time. He was known for his thoughtful demeanor, his strong moral compass, and a deep sense of duty, qualities that would prove immensely beneficial to the impetuous young queen. Albert had visited Kensington Palace in 1836, 3 years before Victoria's accession, and again in 1839. On this second visit, Victoria, now queen, was struck by his grace and intelligence. She found him handsome, discerning, and possessed of a quiet strength that complemented her more fiery nature. In October 1839, during Albert's visit to Windsor Castle, Victoria found herself deeply drawn to him. As queen, it was her prerogative, indeed her duty, to propose marriage. Imagine the scene, a moment of immense personal courage for Victoria, breaking with traditional gender roles, yet entirely in keeping with her regal position. On October 15th, she summoned Albert to her presence. The precise words exchanged are lost to history, but the outcome was profound. Victoria proposed, and Albert, though aware of the challenges and constraints of marrying a reigning monarch, accepted. He understood that his role would be a supportive secondary one, yet he embraced the opportunity to contribute. This personal commitment laid the foundation for a partnership that would profoundly impact not only their lives, but also the monarchy's standing. The announcement of their engagement was met with a mixture of excitement and skepticism within Britain. While the public rejoiced in their young queen's happiness, there was an underlying apprehension about a German prince. Many feared he might exert undue foreign influence on British affairs or drain the royal coffers. These initial reservations, however, would gradually dissipate as Albert's true character and dedication to his adopted nation became evident. The wedding ceremony took place on February 10, 1840, at the Chapel Royal, St. James's Palace. Imagine the grand procession, the solemnity of the vows, and Victoria, radiant in a white satin gown, a revolutionary choice for a royal bride at the time, establishing a trend that continues to this day. The image of the young couple, so clearly in love, captivated the nation. Yet, the early years of their marriage presented their own unique challenges. Albert, a highly intelligent and energetic man, found himself without a clearly defined role. He was prince consort, not king, and initially he lacked the constitutional power or influence he craved. The household was managed by Baroness Leysin, Victoria's beloved governess, who initially resented Albert's attempts to bring order and efficiency to the royal domestic affairs. Albert, however, was not one to be idle. He dedicated himself to mastering his new role, gradually asserting his influence with gentle persuasion and quiet competence. He immersed himself in British affairs, tirelessly working to understand the political landscape, the nuances of the Constitution, and the needs of the nation. He recognized that the monarchy needed to adapt to changing times, to become a symbol of morality, domestic virtue, and enlightened progress, rather than simply a distant ceremonial figurehead. He believed the monarchy should actively promote national welfare and cultural advancement. His influence began to subtly, yet profoundly, transform the royal household and, by extension, the monarchy itself. Albert streamlined the royal finances, introduced efficient management practices, and championed a more disciplined and morally upright court. He encouraged Victoria to engage more deeply with state papers and constitutional matters, patiently explaining complex issues and offering insightful advice. He became, in essence, her most trusted advisor, a steady intellectual anchor for the often emotional queen. His rigorous work ethic and intellectual curiosity were boundless. He took a keen interest in everything from agricultural innovation to military reform, from university education to the promotion of scientific research. The burgeoning family also became a central focus of their lives. Over the next 17 years, Victoria and Albert welcomed 9 children. Victoria, the Princess Royal, 1840, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, 1841, Alice, 1843, Alfred, 1844, Helena, 1846, Louise, 1848, Arthur, 1850, Leopold, 1853, and Beatrice, 1857. Imagine the vibrant, sometimes chaotic life within the royal nurseries, a stark contrast to Victoria's own solitary childhood. Both Victoria and Albert were devoted parents, albeit with strong Victorian views on child rearing. They emphasized duty, discipline, and intellectual development. Albert, in particular, took a profound interest in their education, designing comprehensive curricula for each child, ensuring they were well-versed in languages, sciences, and arts. The image of the royal family, a loving and virtuous domestic unit, became a powerful symbol for a nation that increasingly valued family and morality. Beyond the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, the royal couple sought private retreats where they could enjoy family life away from the intense scrutiny of court. Albert, with his keen eye for design and his love of nature, took the lead in creating these idyllic havens. Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, completed in 1851, became their seaside escape. Designed in the style of an Italianate villa, offering privacy and tranquility. Imagine walking through its lush gardens, gazing out at the Solent, a place where the royal children could play freely and the family could truly relax. Later, in 1852, they acquired Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands. Albert's vision transformed a modest hunting lodge into a grand baronial estate, a place where the wild beauty of Scotland provided a dramatic backdrop for family holidays, hunting, and a retreat from the rigid formalities of court life. These homes were more than just residences. They were living embodiments of Albert's vision for a modern domestic monarchy. Albert's greatest contribution to the nation, and perhaps the most tangible expression of his progressive vision, was the Great Exhibition of 1851. This monumental undertaking, conceived and tirelessly championed by Albert, was a celebration of global industry, art, and technology. Its aim was to showcase Britain's industrial prowess and to promote international peace and cooperation through trade and cultural exchange. Imagine the sheer scale of the endeavor. A vast, glittering structure of iron and glass, the Crystal Palace, erected in Hyde Park, London, designed by Joseph Paxton. It was a marvel of Victorian engineering, a shimmering testament to ingenuity and ambition. Inside, wonders from across the British Empire and the world were displayed. Intricate machinery, exotic raw materials, scientific instruments, and exquisite works of art. Millions flocked to witness this spectacle, from the humblest citizens to foreign dignitaries. The Great Exhibition was an astonishing success, both financially and culturally. It infused the nation with a profound sense of pride and optimism, demonstrating Britain's position as the leading industrial power in the world. For Albert, it was a triumph that cemented his reputation as a far-sighted and invaluable asset to the nation. It showed that he was not merely the Queen's husband, but a dedicated public servant with a vision for national progress. Beyond the grand spectacle, Albert's influence extended into myriad areas of public life. He championed social reforms, particularly in areas like housing for the poor, sanitation, and public health. He was a keen advocate for education, believing it to be the bedrock of a strong society, and played a crucial role in the development of scientific institutions and the establishment of new universities. His quiet, persistent work helped to elevate the moral tone of society and encouraged philanthropy and public service. Yet, even with Albert's growing success and influence, challenges arose. The Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, a conflict primarily fought against Russia, brought about a period of intense public scrutiny for the royal family. While Victoria supported her troops and visited wounded soldiers, Albert faced accusations of interfering in military strategy and of having pro-German sympathies. He was unfairly lampooned in the press and subjected to public criticism. Despite these attacks, he continued to work tirelessly behind the scenes, modernizing the army and improving its administration. This period underscored the delicate balance the monarchy had to strike between engagement in national affairs and remaining above partisan politics. As we conclude this chapter, reflecting on the union of Victoria and Albert, we see the formation of a partnership that was, at its heart, a profound love story. It was a love that transcended the rigid formalities of royal life, grounding Victoria in a way that nothing else could. Albert provided her with intellectual companionship, emotional stability, and a clear vision for the monarchy's future. He was, as she herself would later write, her life, her soul, her all. This enduring love, combined with Albert's tireless dedication and intellectual foresight, laid the foundation for a modernized monarchy, one that would adapt and survive into the coming centuries, truly becoming an enduring symbol for the British people. In the quiet calm of this historical narrative, let us pause and consider the immense impact of this remarkable bond. Our quiet journey through the remarkable life of Queen Victoria now brings us to a somber yet profoundly impactful period. A turning point that would forever alter the course of her reign and the very nature of the monarchy. Having witnessed the enduring love between Victoria and Albert and the blossoming of his invaluable contributions to the nation, we now approach the shadow of an unforeseen tragedy that would cast a long, dark pall over the Queen's life and compel her into a prolonged period of grief and seclusion. In the years following the triumph of the Great Exhibition and the challenges of the Crimean War, Prince Albert continued his tireless work, becoming an indispensable force behind the throne. His vision for a modern, efficient, and morally upright monarchy continued to take root. He was instrumental in shaping public policy, albeit from behind the scenes, and championed causes ranging from agricultural improvements to the establishment of the South Kensington Museums, which were designed to promote art, science, and education for all. He tirelessly sought to prepare their eldest son, Bertie, the Prince of Wales, for his future role as monarch, often with frustration, as Bertie's temperament differed greatly from his own rigorous intellectual discipline. Albert poured his prodigious energy into overseeing the education and strategic marriages of all their children, aiming to secure alliances across the European royal houses, earning him the moniker Grandfather of Europe, even before Victoria truly embodied it. Imagine Albert, ever diligent, his study at Windsor Castle filled with papers, maps, and architectural plans. He was a man constantly engaged, perpetually seeking to improve and refine, driven by a deep sense of duty and a love for his adopted country. Victoria, for her part, had grown increasingly reliant on her beloved angel. He was her confidant, her intellectual equal, her moral compass, and the stable center of her world. Her trust in his judgment was absolute, and she rarely made a significant decision without consulting him. Their life at their beloved private residences, Osborne and Balmoral, offered moments of respite, places where they could briefly escape the rigid formality of court and enjoy the simple pleasures of family life and nature. These were the cherished oases where their love could truly blossom, away from the prying eyes of the public. However, beneath this veneer of tireless dedication, Albert's health was quietly deteriorating. He had long suffered from chronic stomach ailments and rheumatic pains, exacerbated by an immense workload and constant worry. The pressures of his unofficial but vital role, combined with the often hostile public and parliamentary scrutiny he endured as a German prince, took a heavy toll. He drove himself relentlessly, sacrificing his personal well-being for the good of the crown and the nation. The weight of imperial responsibilities, from the ongoing administration of India following the Sepoy Mutiny to the complexities of foreign policy, was a constant presence, discussed nightly with Victoria. In the autumn of 1861, a profound anxiety began to grip the royal household. Prince Albert was increasingly unwell, exhibiting symptoms of exhaustion and a deep malaise. His strength seemed to wane, and his usually robust constitution appeared to betray him. He was also deeply distressed by news of the Prince of Wales's alleged liaison with an actress in Ireland. fearing it would tarnish the moral standing of the monarchy he had worked so hard to elevate. Victoria, concerned, but perhaps not fully grasping the severity of his condition, urged him to rest. It was during this critical period that Albert made one of his most significant and ultimately final interventions in British foreign policy. In November 1861, the Trent Affair erupted. This was a diplomatic incident during the American Civil War, where a U.S. Navy warship forcibly boarded the British mail steamer RMS Trent and removed two Confederate envoys, James Mason and John Slidell. Britain, outraged by this violation of international law and its neutral rights, prepared a strongly worded ultimatum to the United States, demanding the release of the envoys and an apology. War between Britain and the United States seemed perilously close. Lord Palmerston, the Prime Minister, and Lord John Russell, the Foreign Secretary, drafted a dispatch to Washington that was stern and unyielding. Albert, despite his failing health, reviewed the draft. Recognizing the immense danger of war and with a rare flicker of his old vigor, he meticulously revised the ultimatum, softening its language to allow the American government an honorable way to back down without losing face. His amendments transformed a potential declaration of war into a diplomatic solution, preventing what could have been a devastating conflict between two major powers. This act of quiet, judicious diplomacy, undertaken from his sickbed, demonstrated Albert's enduring wisdom and his unwavering commitment to peace and stability. It was, in many ways, his final, profound service to the nation he had come to love. Shortly after this pivotal intervention, Albert's condition rapidly worsened. He was diagnosed by royal physicians with typhoid fever, a common and often fatal disease of the era, though modern historical analysis suggests he may have suffered from a chronic illness like Crohn's disease or even stomach cancer, exacerbated by his unrelenting stress and workload. The symptoms, including severe abdominal pain, weakness, and fever, progressed swiftly. On December 14, 1861, a day that would forever be etched in Victoria's memory and in the annals of British history, Prince Albert passed away at Windsor Castle. Imagine the solemn silence that fell upon the ancient halls as the news spread. Victoria was by his bedside, clutching his hand, a witness to the departure of her life, her soul, her all. The shock was immense, the grief overwhelming. For Victoria, it was as if the sun had set, plunging her world into an unimaginable darkness. She described her loss as feeling as if I had died too. The profound emotional bond they shared, strengthened by 2 decades of shared joys, burdens, and relentless work, meant that his death left an irreparable void. The immediate aftermath was one of utter devastation. Victoria retreated entirely from public life, consumed by her mourning. She donned widow's weeds, black attire, often with a white cap, which she would wear for the remaining 40 years of her life. Buckingham Palace, the bustling heart of government and royal life, became a mausoleum of her grief. She preferred the solitude of Windsor Castle, Osborne House, and particularly Balmoral, her beloved Scottish retreat. For several years, she appeared rarely in public, shunning state occasions, royal engagements, and even the traditional opening of Parliament. Her profound sorrow translated into a deep seclusion, leaving the British people with a queen who was, for a time, largely unseen. The public's reaction to Victoria's prolonged withdrawal was initially one of deep sympathy. The nation mourned with its queen, understanding the depth of her loss. Albert had, by the time of his death, largely overcome earlier public skepticism and was widely respected for his intellect, integrity, and tireless dedication. However, as the years of her seclusion stretched on, sympathy began to wane, gradually giving way to frustration and even open criticism. Republican sentiments, which had been dormant for decades, began to resurface. Cartoonists depicted a grieving queen hidden behind walls, and critics questioned the very relevance of a monarchy whose sovereign was so conspicuously absent from public view. Phrases like the Widow of Windsor were used, sometimes affectionately, sometimes with thinly veiled impatience. Yet, even in her deepest grief, Victoria continued to conduct state business. She signed documents, read dispatches, and corresponded with her ministers, often from the quiet confines of her private apartments, never truly abdicating her constitutional duties. Her reliance shifted to her private secretaries, particularly Sir Henry Ponsonby, who became a crucial intermediary between the reclusive queen and her government. The empty chair at her side was a constant reminder of Albert's absence, but his influence, in a curious way, grew stronger in death. She continued to consult his memory, to uphold his principles, and to strive to complete the projects he had initiated. As we conclude this chapter, let us consider the immense weight of this loss. Albert's death was not merely the end of a life, but the end of an era of close collaborative partnership that had redefined the British monarchy. Victoria's response, her deep and unyielding grief, transformed her from the vibrant young queen into the iconic Widow of Windsor, an image that would define her for decades. This period of intense personal suffering and public withdrawal would profoundly shape the remainder of her long reign, testing the endurance of the monarchy itself and setting the stage for a dramatic reemergence in the years to come. The quiet, reflective space of history invites us now to pause and contemplate the profound silence that fell upon a queen and her nation in that fateful December of 1861. As the tranquil historical current guides us onward, we arrive at a profound and challenging period in Queen Victoria's reign, the decades following the death of her beloved Prince Albert. Imagine the British monarchy, once a vibrant hub of activity under Albert's guiding hand, now cloaked in the somber hues of perpetual mourning. For nearly 2 decades after 1861, Queen Victoria largely retreated from public view, a self-imposed seclusion that would earn her the enduring, if sometimes critical, epithet, the Widow of Windsor. Her grief was not merely profound, it was absolute. Victoria found solace only in the sacred memory of her husband, insisting on the meticulous preservation of his rooms exactly as he had left them, a tangible presence in the quiet corridors of Windsor Castle. She wore black for the remainder of her life, a visual testament to her unending sorrow. State duties, though never fully abandoned, were conducted from the privacy of her royal residences, Windsor, Osborne, and particularly her beloved Balmoral in the Scottish Highlands. Buckingham Palace, once the bustling center of court life, stood largely empty, a symbol of the Queen's profound absence. She rarely opened Parliament in person, avoided grand public ceremonies, and her once frequent appearances before her subjects dwindled to almost nothing. This prolonged withdrawal, however, came at a cost. While the nation had initially grieved with their queen, as years turned into a decade, public sympathy began to wane. A growing unease, and even outright frustration, simmered beneath the surface. Newspapers, once reverential, began to criticize her absence, questioning the value of a monarchy whose sovereign was invisible. Republican sentiment, once a fringe ideology, began to gain traction, championed by figures like the radical liberal MP Charles Dilke and the dynamic Joseph Chamberlain. They argued that a costly, absent monarchy was an anachronism in an increasingly democratic age. Debates in Parliament reflected this growing discontent, with some members openly questioning the financial provisions for a queen who seemed to neglect her public duties. Yet, amidst this public and political discontent, Victoria clung fiercely to her grief, transforming it into a kind of sacred duty. The cult of Albert became central to her existence. She commissioned countless statues, memorials, and institutions in his name, intent on perpetuating his vision and ensuring his legacy. From the Royal Albert Hall to the Albert Memorial in Hyde Park, London was adorned with tributes to her late prince. This was not merely an act of mourning. It was a testament to her profound belief in his genius and her conviction that his ideals should continue to guide the nation. She saw herself as carrying on his unfinished work, a living embodiment of his principles. During these years, the wider royal family also faced immense challenges. The burden of public representation increasingly fell upon the Prince of Wales, Bertie. However, Bertie, known for his love of pleasure and less rigorous intellectual pursuits, often struggled to embody the gravitas and decorum that his parents had meticulously cultivated. His occasional indiscretions and perceived frivolity only fueled Republican criticism. Victoria, still deeply grieving and often critical of her son, reluctantly allowed him to take on more duties, but she rarely afforded him the true trust or influence that Albert had commanded. Meanwhile, her other children married into European royal families, expanding the dynastic network that would soon intertwine the fate of continents. It was during this period of intense personal mourning that a most unusual and deeply significant relationship blossomed, one that would provide Queen Victoria with profound solace and ignite considerable public speculation. This was her connection with John Brown, a Highland gillie, or attendant, who had been a loyal servant to Prince Albert and was known for his blunt honesty and unwavering devotion. After Albert's death, Brown's natural, unpretentious manner, his practical common sense, and his ability to treat the grieving queen as an ordinary woman rather than a monarch proved remarkably comforting. Imagine the stark contrast between the stifling formality of court and Brown's refreshing candor. He would speak to the queen without deferring, sometimes even telling her off, in a way no one else dared. He encouraged her to ride again, to spend more time outdoors in the invigorating air of the Highlands, slowly drawing her out of the deepest depths of her despair. He became her constant companion, riding with her, carrying her sketching bag, and attending to her needs with fierce loyalty. Rumors, of course, abounded. The court, scandalized by the informality of their relationship and Brown's perceived insolence, whispered about a secret marriage, referring to Victoria as Mrs. Brown. While historical consensus points to a deep, platonic, and profoundly affectionate friendship, rather than a romantic or marital one, the bond was undeniably unique and utterly indispensable to Victoria's emotional well-being. Brown's presence provided a vital human connection that helped to sustain her through the darkest years of her widowhood. Despite her personal withdrawal, the wheels of empire continued to turn, and the political landscape of Britain remained dynamic. These years saw the alternating premierships of two towering figures, Benjamin Disraeli, the charismatic conservative, and William Gladstone, the earnest liberal. Victoria's relationships with these two men were vastly different. She found Disraeli's flattery and wit immensely appealing, seeing him as a devoted statesman who understood and respected her imperial ambitions. He charmed her with his grand pronouncements and his vision of Britain as a truly global power. Gladstone, on the other hand, a man of profound moral conviction and intellectual rigor, often exasperated her with his lengthy sermons and his insistence on constitutional propriety. While she respected his intellect, she found his directness and perceived moralizing tiresome. It was Disraeli, with his keen understanding of political theater and his desire to cement Britain's imperial prestige, who masterminded one of the most significant symbolic acts of Victoria's reign, the Empress of India Act of 1876. This act formally declared Victoria as Empress of India, a title that resonated deeply with her and with the popular imagination of the time. Albert had long held a fascination with India and had encouraged closer ties. Now, the vast jewel in the imperial crown was formally linked to the monarch. Imagine the ceremony, though she did not travel to India, the grand pronouncements, and the symbolic significance of this new title. It was a brilliant political stroke by Disraeli, flattering the Queen, asserting British dominance in the East, and capturing the public's imagination with a new, grander vision of empire. It perfectly reflected the prevailing sentiment that Britain's destiny lay in its vast overseas possessions. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Queen Victoria began to re-engage with her public duties. Her health, buoyed perhaps by the presence of John Brown and her unwavering sense of duty, gradually improved. While she never fully abandoned her mourning attire or her preference for private residences, occasional public appearances became more frequent. The political maneuvering of Disraeli, culminating in the Empress of India title, also seemed to energize her, perhaps reminding her of the immense power and symbolic weight she still commanded. This gradual reemergence culminated in a truly spectacular event, the Golden Jubilee of 1887. This grand celebration marked 50 years of Victoria's reign, a milestone unseen by any previous British monarch. Imagine the magnificent processions through the streets of London, adorned with flags and banners, teeming with enthusiastic crowds. Princes and representatives from across the globe, from every corner of her vast empire, gathered to pay homage. The celebration was not merely for a queen. It was a celebration of empire itself, a powerful display of British might, unity, and global reach. Victoria, now a stout elderly figure, dressed still in black but radiating an immense dignity, was truly the grandmother of Europe, a unifying matriarchal figure for her own nation and for much of the continent. The Jubilee marked a profound turning point. Public affection for Victoria, which had waned during her long seclusion, surged anew. She was no longer just the grieving widow, but a revered matriarch, a symbol of stability and continuity in a rapidly changing world. Her quiet strength and unwavering dedication, even in her grief, had quietly resonated with a nation that increasingly valued endurance and tradition. The monarchy's popularity, once questioned, was now firmly reestablished, stronger than ever. As we conclude this chapter, let us reflect on this remarkable transformation. From the depths of personal sorrow to a resurgence of imperial majesty, a testament to the resilience of a queen and the enduring power of her throne. The Golden Jubilee was not just a celebration of the past, but a powerful affirmation of the monarchy's enduring relevance as it approached the dawn of a new century. As our tranquil historical narrative deepens, we now journey into the late decades of Queen Victoria's extraordinary reign, a period marked by her profound transformation from the grieving widow of Windsor to the revered grandmother of Europe and the formidable matriarch of a vast global empire. Having witnessed the resurgence of her public popularity at the Golden Jubilee of 1887, we now observe a queen firmly reestablished in the affections of her people, presiding over an empire at its zenith, yet confronting new challenges on both the domestic and international fronts. Following the immense success of her Golden Jubilee, Victoria embraced her renewed public visibility, albeit still on her own terms. Her daily routine, established over decades, revolved around a meticulous schedule at Windsor, her beloved Osborne on the Isle of Wight, and the rugged beauty of Balmoral in Scotland. These retreats remained her preferred residences, offering a blend of quiet privacy and the space to conduct her ceaseless governmental work. She rose early, attended to state papers, received ministers, and maintained an extensive correspondence, always with the memory of Albert guiding her every decision. His principles, his foresight, and his dedication remained the bedrock of her reign, even decades after his passing. She was, in essence, ruling as much for him as for her subjects. It was during these later years that Victoria's unparalleled network of familial connections across Europe earned her the affectionate and highly accurate moniker, the Grandmother of Europe. Her 9 children had, over the decades, married into almost every major royal house on the continent. Her eldest daughter, Victoria, the Princess Royal, married the future German Emperor Frederick III, becoming the mother of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Her son Alfred married Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia, daughter of Tsar Alexander II. Other children and numerous grandchildren secured unions with the royal families of Russia, Spain, Greece, Denmark, Sweden, and Romania. Imagine the intricate web of familial relationships stretching across the continent, connecting palaces and thrones. This vast dynastic network had a dual impact. On one hand, Victoria genuinely believed it could foster peace and understanding among nations, binding Europe's royal families together in a common interest. Her personal letters to her royal grandchildren often contained advice and gentle admonishments regarding international relations. On the other hand, the close intermarriage also had unforeseen consequences, most notably the unfortunate spread of the genetic condition hemophilia, which afflicted several of her descendants and would tragically impact the Russian and Spanish royal families in the generations to come. Despite these complexities, Victoria cherished her role as a European matriarch, maintaining a voluminous correspondence with her many royal relatives, often offering advice, expressing concern, and sometimes subtly influencing the diplomatic landscape. Domestically, the late Victorian era was characterized by significant political debates and social ferment. One of the most contentious issues was Irish Home Rule. The question of whether Ireland should have its own devolved parliament within the United Kingdom consumed British politics for decades. Victoria held strong, unyielding views on the matter, believing passionately in the preservation of the union between Great Britain and Ireland. She viewed Home Rule as a dangerous step towards the dismemberment of her beloved empire and expressed her staunch opposition to it to her prime ministers. This deeply held conviction often put her at odds with William Gladstone, who, in his later premierships, became a fervent advocate for Irish Home Rule. Their already strained relationship, marked by Victoria's impatience with his long, moralizing disquisitions, worsened considerably over this issue, leading to periods of significant tension between the monarch and her first minister. On the imperial stage, these decades marked the zenith of Britain's global power. This was the era of the scramble for Africa, where European powers carved up the continent and Britain rapidly expanded its colonial possessions across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. The empire grew not just through formal annexation, but also through protectorates and spheres of influence, driven by economic interests, strategic imperatives, and a pervasive sense of civilizing mission. British armies and administrators were engaged in numerous colonial wars and expeditions, from the deserts of Sudan to the mountains of Afghanistan, and most famously the Boer Wars in southern Africa, 1880 to 1881, 1899 to 1902. These conflicts, often brutal and costly, highlighted the challenges and human toll of maintaining such a vast dominion. Victoria, a staunch imperialist, consistently supported her military and took immense pride in the achievements of her soldiers and colonial administrators, seeing the empire as a force for good and a testament to British strength. At home, despite the immense wealth generated by industrialization and empire, significant social challenges persisted. The vast disparities between rich and poor remained stark, and the burgeoning industrial cities often contained areas of desperate poverty, squalor, and disease. The late Victorian period saw the continued growth of trade unions, advocating for workers' rights, and the nascent rise of socialist movements, challenging the established order. While Victoria remained largely detached from the day-to-day realities of urban poverty, she did express a general concern for the welfare of her subjects, often supporting philanthropic endeavors rather than radical legislative reforms. The era also saw a reinforcement of traditional Victorian moral values, even as the seeds of modern social change were being sown. Within her personal life, the passage of time brought continued sorrow. The deaths of her children and close companions were a poignant reminder of her own advancing years. In 1883, she suffered another profound loss with the passing of John Brown, the loyal Highland Gillie, who had been her steadfast companion for 2 decades. His death left another deep void in her life, leading to another period of intense personal sadness. Yet, Victoria found new companionship, notably with an Indian clerk named Abdul Karim, who became her munshi, teacher of Hindustani, and a trusted confidant. This relationship, too, attracted considerable controversy and disapproval from her court and family, who resented Karim's influence and perceived social elevation. Despite the opposition, Victoria remained fiercely loyal to him, valuing his kindness and the exotic connection he offered to her vast Indian empire. This relationship further highlighted Victoria's unconventional side and her need for personal connection that transcended rigid social boundaries. As the century drew to a close, a palpable sense of an era nearing its end began to permeate the air. Victoria, now in her late 70s and early 80s, had reigned for longer than any previous British monarch. Her image, once that of a young, vivacious queen, then a grieving widow, was now that of a stoic, globally recognized figurehead, symbolizing stability, tradition, and imperial power. The approach of her Diamond Jubilee in 1897, marking an unprecedented 60 years on the throne, filled the nation with a profound sense of anticipation. It was understood that this would be more than just a celebration of a reign. It would be a testament to the enduring strength of the British Empire itself and the remarkable woman who had embodied it for so long. As we conclude this chapter, let us reflect on the enduring power of Victoria's presence during these decades. Despite personal sorrows and political challenges, she had not only navigated the complexities of her role, but had also presided over a period of unparalleled imperial expansion and national pride. Her personal journey, from seclusion to renewed public engagement, mirrored the dynamism of her age. The grand spectacle of the upcoming Diamond Jubilee would serve as a final glorious affirmation of her legacy, a final flourish before the inevitable twilight of her long and impactful reign. The quiet hum of history carries us forward towards the momentous culmination of her truly extraordinary life. As our quiet journey through the vast landscape of Queen Victoria's reign draws to its gentle close, we arrive at the twilight years of a truly extraordinary life, a period marked by a final, triumphant outpouring of national affection, followed by the inevitable quietude of her passing. Having witnessed her transformation from a grieving widow to the beloved matriarch, we now approach the culmination of her enduring reign, concluding with her indelible legacy upon the monarchy and the world. The year 1897 dawned with a palpable sense of anticipation, for it marked an unprecedented milestone in British history, Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, celebrating 60 years on the throne. This grand occasion was conceived as an even more spectacular demonstration of imperial unity and might than the Golden Jubilee a decade prior. Imagine the sheer spectacle. London transformed into a kaleidoscope of flags, banners, and jubilant crowds, stretching for miles along the procession route. Representatives from every corner of the vast British Empire, from Indian princes in shimmering silks to Canadian mounted police in their distinctive red, converged on the capital, a living testament to the global reach of Victoria's dominion. On June 22, 1897, the elderly queen, now frail but radiating immense dignity, rode in an open carriage through the teeming streets. She wore black as always, but adorned with the orders and jewels befitting her imperial station. The cheers of the crowds, a profound wave of national devotion, echoed through the city, a sound that surely warmed her aging heart. This was not merely a celebration of a queen, but a powerful affirmation of British global supremacy, a grand day of empire that showcased the diverse peoples and territories united under her crown. For Victoria, it was a moment of immense pride, a confirmation that her steadfast dedication, even through decades of personal grief, had cemented the monarchy's place firmly within the affections of her people. The monarchy, once questioned during her seclusion, now stood at its zenith of popularity, a stable and unifying symbol for a powerful nation. In the years following the Diamond Jubilee, Victoria's health, though remarkably robust for her age, began its slow, inevitable decline. She suffered from rheumatism and failing eyesight, increasingly relying on a wheelchair for mobility. Yet, her commitment to her duties remained unwavering. From her beloved Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, where the salty air brought her comfort, or from the familiar surroundings of Windsor, she continued to process state papers, grant audiences to her ministers, and maintain her extensive correspondence with her royal relatives across Europe. The turn of the new century brought with it the challenges of the Second Boer War, 1899 to 1902, in South Africa. This conflict, fought against Dutch-speaking settlers, proved to be a protracted and costly affair for Britain, generating considerable controversy and public dissent at home. Victoria, however, remained staunchly supportive of her troops, frequently visiting military hospitals, awarding medals, and dispatching comfort items to the front lines. Her unwavering resolve during this difficult period further solidified her image as a steadfast and patriotic sovereign, even as the nation grappled with the complexities of imperial warfare. These final years were a testament to her enduring sense of duty, a quiet strength that transcended her increasing physical frailty. As the winter of 1900 to 1901 descended, it brought with it a palpable sense that an era was drawing to its close. Victoria, now approaching her 82nd birthday, spent Christmas at Osborne House, as was her custom. Her strength was rapidly failing. Her doctors diagnosed her with cerebral hemorrhage. On January 22, 1901, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, including her eldest son and heir, Albert Edward, and her grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Queen Victoria gently passed away at Osborne. Imagine the quiet solemnity of that moment, the hush that fell over the royal household as the news spread. It was more than just the death of a monarch. It was the end of an age. The flags across Britain and the Empire were lowered to half-mast, and a profound sense of collective grief enveloped the nation. For millions, Victoria had been the only sovereign they had ever known, a constant presence through generations of change. Her passing marked not just the end of a reign, but the definitive closure of the Victorian era, a transition into the new Edwardian age that would soon define the early 20th century. The funeral, held on February 2, 1901, was a grand yet deeply moving spectacle. Breaking with royal tradition, her coffin was pulled by horses rather than mourners, a fitting tribute to her lifelong love of horses. The procession through the streets of London, watched by silent, grieving crowds, underscored the depth of affection and respect she had commanded. She was buried beside her beloved Albert in the royal mausoleum at Frogmore, Windsor, her fervent wish to be reunited with him finally realized. Queen Victoria's legacy is immense and multifaceted. Her greatest achievement was arguably the restoration and modernization of the British monarchy. Having inherited a weakened institution plagued by scandal and unpopularity, she, with Albert's profound influence, transformed it into a symbol of moral rectitude, domestic virtue, and constitutional stability. She understood the evolving nature of democracy, gradually shifting the monarchy's role from active political intervention to that of a unifying, symbolic head of state, a model that largely endures to this day. Her unwavering sense of duty, her dedication to her people, and her resilience in the face of immense personal loss provided a powerful example for future monarchs. Her reign also defined an empire at its zenith. The Victorian age saw the British Empire expand to its greatest territorial extent, becoming an unparalleled global power whose influence stretched across continents. While this era brought immense wealth and prestige to Britain, it also laid the groundwork for complex relationships with colonized nations whose struggles for independence would shape the future. Beyond politics and empire, the Victorian age itself became synonymous with a distinct set of values: morality, earnestness, technological progress, rigid social structures, and a vibrant cultural landscape. Victoria, though sometimes distant, embodied many of these characteristics, becoming a living emblem of her time. Her personal story, her love for Albert, her profound grief, her remarkable longevity, deeply resonated with her subjects, making her a uniquely human and relatable figure despite her royal status. As the echoes of this history gently fade into the present, we invite you to reflect on the remarkable journey of Queen Victoria. From a young, unexpected heir to the long-reigning empress of a vast global power, her life was a testament to duty, love, and resilience. Her influence, like the ripples in a quiet pond, continues to spread through the institutions, traditions, and even the very values of the modern world. In the tranquil stillness, let her story settle in your mind, a timeless narrative of an enduring queen and her profound impact on history. Rest now, as the past drifts into the dreams of the present.